this is Judy from the Huron County Community Library, and today we're celebrating Black History Month, which is February, and we're going to be making a dish with soul seasoning. So Jen's here to help me out, and she's going to help me do some cooking, but she's first going to give you some history of what soul food actually is.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our little cooking lesson on soul food seasoning and a little bit of history on soul food as we celebrate Black History Month. What is soul food? It's not Southern cooking. A lot of people do assume that it is because of its Southern roots, but it is a completely different culture and a completely different cultural food that is specific to African Americans. Soul food came out of the Deep South and migrated following Reconstruction up through the North into areas like Chicago, Cleveland, Detroit. So today's soul food is slightly different than those dishes because they picked up along the way some northern spices and some northern twists as they came. The soul seasoning that we're going to do today, that particular mixture is a mixture of ingredients that came from enslaved people cooking on the plantations, but also begin to be mixed together in Chicago, actually. So it's a little bit of more traditional, modern soul seasoning. Soul food didn't have a name until the 1960s, which is when it became defined as traditional African American food. Soul food is a response to the racial inequalities that came out of the Deep South during the Civil War, during enslavement, and even in through Jim Crow and today. Food is a way to instill identity and pride. It is a way to create a narrative, and it's a way to show some creativity. And those that were enslaved had to make meals out of necessity with what was given to them, and out of that came soul food. The term soul food was first used in 1962 by an activist and a poet. Then Sylvia Woods, who opened her now famous Harlem restaurant that same year. Woods was known as the queen of soul food, and her recipes and cookbooks and even some of her restaurants are still in existence today. So soul food has its roots in the enslavement of African people. They had to make meals based on what they were given and what rations they were allowed to have. So typically they were given like 5 pounds of a starch, which could have been a cornmeal, rice, or potato, whatever the cheapest meat was. And it really often wasn't like a good slice of meat. It was usually salted or dried, and it was not very much, just a couple of pounds, and then like a jug of molasses. That was a pretty standard ingredients that they were given, and then they were told to cook for everyone that was within their area. In order to create that identity and pride that we're talking about, they started growing vegetables. That's why there's a lot of fried greens, because that was something that they could grow outside in their allotted area, and it would add some flavor to their food. So basically they had to get really creative in order to have a meal that was good and a meal that was nutritious. They had to supplement that with fishing, foraging, hunting, gardening. That's where we see okra coming in from West Africa, and then passing down what they knew about farming from their West African heritage. There was not at that time a huge difference in some ways between what those that were enslaved were eating and what poor white people were eating. The only difference was that enslaved people didn't have any choice whatsoever. It's what they were given. If they were being punished, those rations were taken away. They weren't given as much or any, and they had to make do with foraging and hunting on their own. So for the next 100 years after the end of slavery, Black Americans continued to cook in this manner using ingredients that were part of this now food tradition for them. Today's soul food looks pretty similar to that soul food. It's a little bit different. Most people believe that soul food isn't super healthy because there's a lot of frying, a lot of breading. Judy's going to talk about cornbread, which is something that enslaved people ate a lot for breakfast. But actually, soul food is pretty healthy. There's now even vegan soul food restaurants. A lot of restaurants are even offering soul food within their menus. You'll see options that are listed as soul food. So the food itself, which is now kind of associated with comfort food, that's a word that's often used for soul food and Southern cooking is comfort food, came out of a struggle for survival. If you're looking for more information on the history of soul food, we have several books at the library that are available to check out. There's also quite a few websites that are dedicated to the history of soul food. Stop by and see us and we can show you some of those books.
Okay, today Jen and I are going to be making red beans and rice. And we're starting with our basic soul food seasoning, which you would have gotten in your packet. So that soul food seasoning looks like this. It contains black pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, dark chili powder, paprika, salt, dried thyme, celery seed, dried parsley, and a little bit of cayenne pepper. Now don't be afraid that this is a really hot spicy dish because it isn't that spicy. I wanted to start with something with a medium spice that everyone could enjoy and then spice it up as you like it. Okay, so we're going to start with...
The soul food spicing is also different than Southern cooking spicing. Like Judy said, it's not hot. It just has more flavor, has a little bit more kick. And the soul food spice that she just went through would be a really standard that enslaved people would have used a rendition of as they were starting soul food cooking.
Okay, the first thing we're going to start with is our sausage. The traditional red beans and rice has a sausage called andouille sausage, which is originally from France. It's a spicy sausage that contains pork, garlic, pepper, onions, and wine. Now I'm using smoked sausage. You could use kielbasa. You could even use a turkey sausage if you wanted. So I sliced it in about 1/4-inch pieces, and Jen's going to put that in the skillet back there, and we're just going to brown it a little bit for a few minutes. And after that browns for a few minutes, we're going to add chopped onion, 1/2 cup of celery, that's 1 onion, and 1 chopped pepper. Now, in a lot of cooking, this is referred to as the Trinity. A lot of dishes start with these 3 ingredients. So after that sausage gets a little bit brown, Jen's going to add these 3 ingredients, and we're going to cook those until they're soft. I've also started back here on the burner my chicken broth for the rice. We're going to serve this dish over rice. You could use low sodium chicken broth if you wanted. So it's 2 cups of chicken broth, and then when that starts to boil, I'm going to add 1 cup of white rice. And we're going to cook that about 20 minutes until it's soft. Okay, also in our dish here are 2 cans of kidney beans. What I really like about this dish is you can adapt it to whatever you like. Of course, red kidney beans would be the traditional bean in this dish, but if you don't like kidney beans, use black beans or pinto beans or whatever you like. Usually when I make a dish, I go by the recipe the first time I make it, and then I change it the second time around. I'm also going to add a can of crushed tomatoes. You could add diced tomatoes if you wanted, or whatever kind of tomatoes you like. I like the crushed because it makes kind of a sauce that way. So another way you could make this a little hotter is you could, of course, we're adding 3 teaspoons of the spice. You could add more spice, but you could also put some hot sauce on at the end. I don't use hot sauce, but you could just sprinkle some over the top of your dish when it's all done. So what we're going to do is we're browning that meat a little bit. Then we're going to add our onions, green peppers, and celery. And after that, it gets soft, we'll add these ingredients here. And then we'll cook that for about 20 minutes. We'll simmer it a little bit, serve it over our rice. So while that's cooking back there, I want to tell you about a couple other things I added to this. We're going to have as a side dish some southern cornbread. What I learned about cornbread when I was doing a little research here is the best cornbread is baked in an iron skillet. And this particular recipe said to put a tablespoon of bacon drippings in your iron skillet and then put it in the stove. Let that get hot. Whenever you're baking your cornbread in, you want to put that dish in the stove first and let it get hot. That makes the bottom of your cornbread a little crispier. And I also learned I think the best cornbread is made with buttermilk. So I have this southern cornbread we're going to have along with our red beans and rice. And later on I'm going to show you I made an apple butter pie. I was doing some research and I came across this Sister Chester May Hayes apple butter pie. Now a lot of Southern cooking and soul food, sweet potato pie would be your traditional pie. But I found this recipe and it's really good because you already have the seasonings in your apple butter and then you add some more seasonings to that. So we'll be showing that off at the end. But I want to show you the book that I got this from. Actually, the lady wrote 2 books, Sweetie Pies by Patty Pinner. This is the most interesting pie book I've ever seen. She has a whole chapter on cereal pies. So that's where this apple butter pie recipe came from. It's pretty much made like a pumpkin pie, but instead of pumpkin you're using apple butter. She also has another book called Sweets, and in here she has some interesting pies. There's a cantaloupe pie, there is a butter bean pie, and she has a whole chapter on pudding. Not pudding, but a whole chapter on puddings. So those are real interesting books you might want to check out. So we're going to go back to the stove here and do some cooking, and we'll plate it up and show you the final dish in a few minutes. All right, here we are with our finished product. Our white rice with our red beans and rice on top, our southern cornbread, and our apple butter pie with a little bit of Cool Whip. I hope you try our recipes and look forward to our monthly spice packets and recipes. Thanks for watching.